Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. It's September 16th, 2020. I'm Brandon Mileski, Pat Micheletti with me. And Beyond the Pod is brought to you by Culturama and SodaStick, sodastick.com. And Pat, we have plenty of Minnesota Wild stuff to talk about. We'll talk about that later in this podcast. But right now we're pleased to be joined by the Commissioner of the National Collegiate Hockey Conference, the NCHC, Josh Fenton. Josh, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I have to imagine this has been a challenging time for a commissioner the last couple of months.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to see both of you. Certainly, I think for anybody across our country, to be honest with you, over the past maybe 6 months, it's been a challenging time. I think in the sporting world, whether it be professional sports or collegiate sports or our small little world of college hockey, it's certainly been a challenge. But we're working our way through it, and we're optimistic that we can get going on the season here very shortly.
Yeah, everyone wants to get back and get rolling and get back to some sort of normalcy. Some good news you reported the other day, semi-good news, I should say. One, we all know that the season is going to be delayed a little bit, but at least there is now optimism about when it potentially could start.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were getting to the point, Pat. So the commissioners of college hockey across all 6 conferences, actually even beyond, including the women's conferences with Jen Flowers of the WCHA, have been meeting for months now. And so we've tried to move and act together as one body. We're a small enough group that we feel like we can do that. And so last week was kind of the culmination of many discussions about, okay, what is it that we're doing? Where is it that we're going? And as you think back to last week, we were a week and a half out from the start of the women's hockey season. And so for the sake of women's hockey, if we were going to say something collectively, we needed to do it. And that was kind of the point where we got to last week. Everybody announced a delay. I think that was understood and kind of known by many people across college hockey. And we were just able to get to the point of actually announcing that delay.
The delay at least will go through November 20th. Obviously that can be pushed back at some point, but how many different schedules do you have to plan at this point for, a November 20th date? If it gets pushed back 2 weeks, if it gets pushed back a month, 2 months, I mean, how many different schedules and really variables are you guys considering at this moment?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, Brandon, is that we're just focusing on ensuring competition can begin in the safest and most responsible manner for everybody involved. We've got an obligation to our member campuses and the presidents and chancellors that run those campuses to start competition, whether that's hockey or otherwise, in that safe and responsible manner. And so I think the delay generally gives us time to hopefully have campuses safely reopen before we introduce athletic competition. But yes, you're correct. Our scheduling models are being built in and around that date. The November 20th date for us was to allow for some clarity as it relates to the timeline. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to start exactly on November 20th, but the models being explored are around that date. And we have many, many different models. We've got different amounts of conference games, as few as 20. That probably doesn't happen until if we have to start in January, and as many as 28. And in our conference, we've typically played 24. Really since the start of the conference. And so we're kind of in the middle there of different types of models, different numbers of games. And so we're going to keep working it. I don't know that a schedule model will be announced for some time because time is on our side here, and we want to make sure that we've got the model that makes the most sense. And for the environment we're living in, we need to wait for a little bit here.
Hey, Josh, let's face it, everybody is facing financial challenges in the sporting industry. Hockey is certainly one of those with, there's no major TV contract. The reliance on fans in your buildings is really, really important. Are there things that you're trying to do, or all of the commissioners to find a way to, bring in more revenue?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, in separation of kind of the two areas of revenue, we've got campus generated revenue, which is obviously owned and operated by each of our member schools. And I think the concerning thing there is, what will be allowed from a fan standpoint. They're heavily reliant upon the revenue that's driven out of their venues. It starts with the ticket purchase, then, extends into the parking and the concessions. And merchandise and all the other revenue streams that come out of the venue. That's school specific. And so there's certainly an impact that I know our schools are trying to manage as best they can, knowing that they probably won't be at full capacity, maybe even for the entire season. The second half of that is, conference related revenue. And for us in most college hockey conference, the bulk of that is driven through the tournament. Well, our tournament isn't until March. And so when we talk about actually having a lot of time on our side, that certainly is in our benefit. We're planning for our tournament to be hosted as normal right now. We're fully aware that may not necessarily be able to happen. We're also aware that if we can host our tournament, it may be in a limited capacity situation. And so that may have some impact on revenue. So I think all of us, whether it's in the conference office or on the campus, have building budget models, anticipating significant revenue decline this year and attempting to manage that as best we can.
Josh, you mentioned that kind of your biggest priority is just making sure your student athletes are safe when you return to play. Obviously, the sports that have had the most success, the NHL and the NBA have had bubbles, and even Major League Soccer to a certain extent. That seems like an impossible thing with college hockey. So, you at the very least, you do have the NFL and college football to kind of learn off of coming up here. But what kind of things are you guys doing to make sure that your student athletes will be safe?
Well, first off is number one, we're developing an internal conference protocol that helps us look at kind of a safe and healthy return to competition. So we have consistent standards applied across all venues. We have a committee had been established earlier in the summer. That committee's met numerous times over the course of the past couple of months. And so we're developing protocols so that a student athlete that walks into venue X knows how it's going to operate. And then similarly, when he moves over to venue Y, maybe on the next weekend, it'll be a lot of the same feelings. And so just the consistency of protocol within our venues. I think secondarily, Brandon, it goes up to the NCAA and what the NCAA is, what they're calling resocialization guidelines to collegiate sport. And then if you drill down a little further into that, that's when you get into the testing requirements. Right now there's a requirement for hockey, which classified as a high contact risk sport, as testing at least one time per week. We believe that those testing guidelines from the NCAA are actually going to morph and adjust over the next few weeks here. And certainly our institutions are going to follow the NCAA guidelines. And we're even having discussions about, is there additional testing that we need to add on top of that to ensure that our athletes are feeling safe throughout each course of the week. So there's a lot of measures that are being put into place. And then the last thing I guess I would say is that we're sharing a lot of the information across conferences. So we may learn something from another conference and they may learn something from us. But bottom line is we're focused on ensuring a safe and responsible return so those student athletes are feeling safe.
All right, Josh, a lot of people have asked me, the landscape of college hockey, your league specifically, some of the teams. Obviously, there's not going to be any changes this year. Anything happening in the NCHC that you want to fill us in on?
Well, I would tell you, Pat, that my time, about 99% of it has been consumed by, are we playing hockey this year and how are we going to play hockey? And, I tell you, I'm not going to rest until we've exhausted any and all options to give the student athletes the experience they deserve. So as it relates to, membership or conference alignment or those types of discussions, we haven't had a ton of those recently. But we know that there's situations out there that may necessarily need to be discussed in the future. We just haven't been discussing them as of recent because of the situation we're in.
Talking with Josh Fenton, who is the commissioner of the NCHC. I'm Brandon Mileski. Pat Micheletti was with me, and just having some audio issues here. So I'm just gonna do a little read here, if that's okay. Let's talk about SodaStick. SodaStick.com. Go to SodaStick.com to get your original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. They just launched their partnership with Michelob Golden Light for the Michelob Golden Light Fishing Club merch line. The logo features a walleye chugging a beer. They've got it on shirts, hoodies, hats, windbreakers, and more. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to check it out. We're going to hook you up with free shipping on your order. Use the code KFN for free shipping. That is SodaStick.com. Original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. Use the code KFN for free shipping. Hopefully, I'm gonna put you down, Pat, while I ask Josh a question, because I think Pat's the feedback issues we're having right now. I did want to follow up on that question from Pat. Just kind of what are your overall thoughts on the 7 teams leaving the WCHA to go to the CCHA, and then the University of St. Thomas now eventually becoming a Division I school here a year from now? Your thoughts on just kind of those teams removing themselves from that conference, and did you guys ever have any discussions with St. Thomas regarding the NCHC?
We didn't have any specific discussions with St. Thomas regarding the NCHC. I know Phil Irvin just from the collegiate athletic days, and he and I have chatted over the past couple of years as it relates to, what does it mean to move from Division III to Division I? And so we've kind of just generally had those conversations. But number one, we're excited for St. Thomas, a great institution in St. Paul there. I have had a lot of history and tradition with their hockey program and athletic program overall, and I think they're going to do a great job once they can move their way up to Division I hockey. And so it's a great addition to the new CCHA, which will get going here in a year or so's time. But yeah, I think, Brandon, the larger point is that there's still geographic alignments that probably need to be discussed regarding college hockey in the West. We certainly cross over each other in our alignments, and we're going to continue to be a part of those discussions. We felt like the NCHC has been properly positioned and obviously has had some success over the past 6 or 7 years here. And we're certainly very good and comfortable with the membership, but at the end of the day, we also have an obligation to the sport overall. And so we need to be a part of the conversations, if those conversations are going to happen, about what does it mean for college hockey in the West, and what do those alignments look like in the future?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm glad you have that attitude, and because we all want to continue to grow the game, and you hate to see teams get retracted or drop their program, and unfortunately we see that happen in Anchorage, and Huntsville, was able to maintain at least for another year. There's the Arizona State that, has done very, very well, still without a league. And there's been talk of Illinois and Iowa and, maybe some other schools coming in. And so, I just hope that we can continue to make the right decisions and continue to grow the game and give more kids an opportunity.
Yeah, Pat, I would say that, I'd liken it to a lot of different puzzle pieces that are sitting on the table, and we haven't quite yet figured out how to put that puzzle together. But I can tell you that the NCHC will be an active participant in listening to the discussions that are out there, if it means that it's in the best interest of the sport overall. Certainly, as our conference, we have to look after the 8-member institutions within our own backyard, and that will be the priority moving forward. But if there's a greater good type of cause that can come out of a discussion about alignments in the West for college hockey, we want to be a part of that.
I know
Josh,
go ahead, Pat.
Quick question in terms of, let's say that, the fans are not allowed for a while. And I know you have NCHC TV or contract with CBS, and then some of the schools have their own TV broadcast. To keep the interest in the game for the fans, are you going to try to do anything more to get more games on TV? Or where are you at it from that perspective on the broadcast side of things?
Well, so we have great partners in CBS Sports Network, as you referenced, and then our digital product through NCHC TV.
Yep.
I think our digital product is going to be a heavily watched platform this year for games. We're streaming any and all games other than those on CBS Sports Network through that digital platform. And if fans don't have the ability to come into their own venue and watch their favorite team, we certainly hope that they take advantage through the digital network, because the high quality production that comes out of all of our schools is a great product for our fans to consume. And so we encourage people to consume games through NCHC TV. But yes, our CBS Sports Network contract calls for a set number of games. Those games won't start until after the new year. That's how the schedule is set up. That's how we've wanted the schedule to set up.
Right.
So we
Right.
kind of have a run of games leading up to the end of the season. But then we also have some partners like Fox Sports North regionally in your area. Good relationship with their general manager, Mike Diamond, and we've had a relationship with them for many years now. And we're looking to continue that relationship here this year and beyond. A little to be determined on how that gets figured out, just based
Yeah.
upon what the schedule is going to be and what the makeup of the games look like. But our television partners are very important to us, and we think they're going to be even vitally important, more important this year.
I think what Pat was getting at is he wants to be on television more doing your games. I think that's what he was getting at.
We love having Pat on television.
Yeah.
He flies the NCHC flag quite well.
Final question for you, Josh. I kind of lost track of what I was going to ask you. I know you've been dealing with so much COVID stuff, so maybe in terms of the actual product on the ice, you haven't put a whole lot of thought into it. But it seems like every year in college hockey, there's some sort of change, whether it's the way they do overtime or instant replay or penalties or the playoff tournament. Is there any changes, regardless of COVID, that we could envision in the NCHC this upcoming season?
Well, overtime is the big one. So, Brandon, we have
Right.
a two-year rule book, and this was a rule change year. And the biggest change that came out of it, which was frankly years in the making, and the NCHC leading the charge on this, is to come up with a consistent overtime structure that involves 3-on-3. And we finally gotten ourselves to that point. And so the game will be 60 minutes of regulation, like you see in the National Hockey League and most other kind of elite hockey entities across the world. And then we're going right into 5 minutes of 3-on-3. Previously 5 minutes of 5-on-5. Then there was this provision where conferences could continue with 3-on-3 for points in conference standings. Well, now all of us, including on the men's, women's, Division I, Division III side of things, will go from 60 minutes of regulation right to 5 minutes of 3-on-3. There is a provision for a 3-person shootout in there for conferences that want to use it to award points. My last check of my colleagues across the country, I believe that every conference actually will be in a 3-point model, and so everybody will be using the shootout for their own conference points. But the game nationally will still be considered a tie after that 5 minutes of 3-on-3. So that's a pretty big change, and I think a change that's welcomed by fans across the entire country, and it's also going to speed the game up a little bit.
Yeah, we'd definitely love to watch it. Thank you so much for your time, Josh. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks, guys. Good
Yeah.
seeing you.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, Josh
Talk to you soon.
Fenton. Josh Fenton, he is the commissioner of the National Collegiate Hockey Conference. And Pat, before we talk some Minnesota Wild hockey, why don't you talk about one of our sponsors on Beyond the Pod, Culturama?
I will do that, Brandon. Just give me a second right here. Having trouble getting brand recognition, media exposure, or promotion? Looking to find specialized tournament or event management services? At Culturama, they cultivate, collaborate, and connect you to new business strategies to maximize your organization's publicity through strategic brand development, multimedia creation, social media design, sponsorship promotion, targeted marketing plans, or event management services. With over 20 years of experience, Culturama creative teams will guide you through a comprehensive plan to reach your brand goals. Follow, like, and subscribe to Culturama today to learn how to obtain a PR plan.
Anyone watching this on the KFAN YouTube channel and subscribes to the KFAN YouTube channel knows that we don't edit anything going on in this podcast. So
No, we don't.
all the screw ups you get to watch,
That's me.
and you also get to listen to
Typically
it.
me.
No, it's typically something going on, but
Right.
we have lots of Minnesota Wild stuff to talk
Yeah,
about
we
here,
do.
Pat. And let's begin with the signing yesterday. Jonas Brodin, the defenseman, he gets a 7-year, $42 million contract that will begin in next season, the following season, the 2021-2022 season. I want to know your thoughts on this contract. It was kind of an interesting guy to extend here, Pat, because most defensemen that get paid a lot of money produce offensively. And Jonas is not one of those defensemen, and I'm not convinced he'll ever be one of those defensemen. I really think you're paying him for the defenseman he is now. I don't see a lot more upside coming from Jonas Brodin, but I would also say I think he's pretty safe. I don't see him I think he's the kind of guy as he gets older, because of the way he plays and doesn't take a lot of hits and doesn't play that physical brand, that
Right.
he's going to stay healthy. So I don't see the contract being a bust, but I think you're just kind of paying him for what you see out of him right now.
A couple schools of thought. I think the contract is fair. I don't like the no move. I'm happy for the player that he can get that. I know it's only for 4 years on the no move part of it. But when you're looking at high end defensemen, yeah, you expect them to be a point producer. That gets you probably up in the $8 million range. Okay, he is. Hey, be quiet. My dog, and Jonas is getting 6 million. So I think that's fair. About his upside on the offensive side, he's never really had to be that because they've had other guys that they've used in that position. I don't know if they've asked him to get more involved offensively. I think we saw that a little bit in the playoffs. He was getting up in the play a little bit more, and he can do that. Can he be a point producer? To your question, I don't know if he can. I think they're going to ask him to try to do a little bit more. And if he does, I think it'll be a bonus. Listen, you know how I've enjoyed his play, and I know the fans here in Minnesota have. So I'm happy that he's still going to be part of this organization.
Well, he's elite defensively. I mean,
Without a doubt.
you can put him up against
Got the
any.
best feet in the league.
Yeah, you can put him up against any top line in the league. I mean, how many times have we seen Nathan MacKinnon coming down full speed, and he turns around and you're like, how did he just stay with Nathan MacKinnon on that? No,
Right.
The vast majority of defensemen can't do that. So from that standpoint, it's nice to know that you'll have him going up against guys like Nathan MacKinnon moving in the future. From an offensive standpoint, I guess, things would change if you had a lot more of an offensive-minded team, right? If he's playing somewhere else, maybe he could contribute a little bit more offensively. Because of his speed and his skating, I think he definitely could score more just jumping up in the play.
The ability, right?
But let's face it, the shot is always going to keep him from being a power play producer and scoring a lot from the blue line. I mean, I just don't see that aspect of his game ever increasing offensively. So if he was to gain offense, to me, it's jumping up on odd man rushes.
Yeah, and the good thing, and I think back, Brandon, to his career here, and how many times we've done a show, whether it be Beyond the Pond or a pregame show, postgame show, whatever the case may be, we never talk about him. We never, never,
He doesn't make mistakes.
It's just Brodin being Brodin, right?
Yep.
I would like to continue that for a number of years, with him in a Wild uniform, and I think we'll see that. Interesting that they knew they probably had to get him done or trade him, and now that they signed him and can't move him, we know he's here. So that means, what are they thinking? Right? They're either thinking, okay, we probably are going to have to move somebody, and that could be Matt Dumba. We don't know, but he'd be the likely candidate. So that brings in Addison, Kalen Addison, the draft pick or the player they got from Pittsburgh in the Jason Zucker trade. Do they think he may be ready sooner than later? Because they're gonna have to, tell Jared Spurgeon, we want you to contribute more than you have offensively. So
and he can, I think,
no doubt, right? I mean, there's no question. So maybe their mindset is, we're gonna try to get something more out of Brodin and Spurgeon, and maybe move a defenseman and try to get the forward help that they need.
Well, let's talk about the Dumba aspect of this, because as you mentioned, Brodin has a no move clause. So Brodin, Spurgeon, and Suter all have no moves. The expansion draft is a year away. I think most people that are, if you're watching or listening to this, you're probably a hockey fan, so you probably already know the rules. But you can either keep 7 forwards and 3 defensemen, or just 8 skaters total. So if you wanted to keep 4 defensemen, you'd have to go the 8 skater route, which would mean you can only keep 4 forwards. Right. What all this means is, If they were to go the 7-3 approach,
Yep.
to me, that means you have to trade Matt Dumba now.
Yep.
Your other option is to keep the 8 skaters and keep those 4 defensemen. And frankly, I don't have an issue with that because after your top 4 forwards, you have to keep Parise and Zuccarello.
Yep.
And obviously Fiala is going to be kept.
Yep.
Now, depending on who you get in free agency and trades, that this might change. But as of right now, your options are, keeping Greenway or Cunnin or Foligno, and like I'm keeping Dumba over all of those guys.
All bottom guys,
yeah.
You're not
a top guy. And the other part of this is you could also do what the Wild did the last time and make some sort of deal for Seattle to pick a certain guy you want. That did not turn out too well last time for the Minnesota Wild, but there's a new GM and a different team.
Faster, right?
So let's talk about Dumba, though, and how safe he is, because if they were to move a defenseman, that's the guy to go, just because he's the one of the, he's the only one you can bring something back that doesn't have a no move. And if you want to bring in a top 2 center or a top 6 forward, that's going to have to be the guy here this offseason.
We talked before the show a little bit, and I'm thoroughly convinced that Bill Guerin is on the hunt to make, not just trading Matt Dumba, but moving more pieces. And if they want to get better, he's watching the playoffs. He saw his team in the playoffs, and this team is just not good enough. And we can massage it. We can say, oh, but if, and this guy will come around. He's seen enough of every one of these players, and the guys that they have been here, and we know who they are. We know what they are, and so I really believe that he's going to really try to shake up this team if he can do it. Now, it's easier said than done. You just, you just don't make deals, right? I mean, you need another partner to make a deal with. But I think goaltending again. I think he's gonna find a goaltender, and I think he's gonna move some of the younger guys that, quite frankly, haven't performed for him. And in that group, you've got Cunnin, Eck, Greenway. I think Foligno's going to be back, but the guys I mentioned, I think all could be moved or offered.
One guy it doesn't look like is coming back, at least according to Michael Russo. That would be a longtime center. Mikko Koivu probably will be like the first guy to ever get his number retired in a Minnesota Wild uniform. A pretty good run for him in a Minnesota Wild uniform. Before we talk about what to do without him, I kind of just want to go over just kind of his career.
Yeah.
Pat, I think Mikko Koivu was a pretty good player for the Minnesota Wild. The one knock against him, I think, was kind of out of his control. And you and I have talked about this many times that, if Mikko Koivu was your second center here throughout the course of his career and you had a legit number 1 scoring center, I think a lot less people would be hating on Mikko Koivu. But the fact that he was kind of forced into that number 1 role when he wasn't number 1 center led to some criticism by some fans.
Oh, yeah. I don't know of a player who's gotten criticized more than Mikko Koivu. Listen, is it his fault that they told him that you're the number 1 center because we can't get anybody else? And he was thrust into that position. And you talk to any of the players he played with and, so forth and so on. Good teammate, played both ends of the ice, didn't score. I mean, he wasn't a point producer, or it dropped off later in his career. But listen, he's had a wonderful career here. And, you get to the point where father time catches up to you and it's probably a good time for him to either go to a new team or, go back to Finland and play and go from there. But he's had a terrific career, and you know what? He's been stoic throughout his whole career. You never saw him, go to extremes one way or the other with his comments, with the way he presented himself, with the way he handled. Listen, he went through more general managers and coaches than a lot of guys, throughout their career. So, I think he should be applauded, and he was a good steward for this organization.
All right, let's talk about the center position then, which we probably will talk about a lot over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, they have Eric Stahl, they have Joel Eriksson Ek, maybe Nico Sturm, and they just acquired former Minnesota Golden Gopher, former Blaine Bengal Nick Bukestad. They get from the Penguins in exchange for a 2021 conditional 7th-round selection. Pittsburgh will retain half of that salary against the salary cap. So, when I first heard this, Pat, I was just kind of like,
Yeah.
He's a guy who's been hurt a lot over the last couple of years. When healthy, has been able to be a 20-goal scorer. But obviously, if they don't make any other center moves, I'm not too excited. But I will say there's not a lot of risk here. Not that he's a super high reward guy. Not that he's going to be your number one center. But I do think the reward outweighs the risk here in this situation with Bukestad.
Well, listen, they've got a lot of bottom six forwards, right?
Yeah,
we know he's not going to be a top six guy. I've known Nick a long time. Through his days at the University of Minnesota, and when you look at him, he is a specimen. He has everything that you want in a NHL player: size, speed, skill. The one thing that he hasn't been able to conquer yet is the physical, and I use this loosely, not the engaging, okay, the getting engaged in the game. He should be a guy with his, he's 6'5", can skate like the wind. He should be able to dominate and he hasn't gotten to that point where he's become a dominant player. And that means getting dirty, getting in those tough areas, blowing by a guy, putting on a big hit, just kind of controlling, the ice when he's out there. And I don't know if it's in his DNA to be that type of player, but he certainly has everything that you want. Maybe Minnesota can get something more out of him. The risk involved in this deal was very minimal. And if he can, if he can generate some offense, being your third line center, then, then it'll be a bonus to Minnesota.
Yeah, he's a big, strong guy. He's a right shot, which his organization has been desperately needing, especially at the center position. So,
if possible,
Yep. Well, that's the other thing. If they do acquire some centers, you can also play some right wing for you on your bottom six. So, like I said, it's very little risk. One, it's a 7th-round pick, and two, if he doesn't play 70 games or I think it was 35 points,
right,
you're getting him for free. So it's basically you just have to pay the salary, which at $2 million isn't a whole lot. So to me, it's worth the chance on him. But I just, because he was a Golden Gopher and because he was coming here and he's a first-round pick, people might think high end, and I think that's not going to happen for him.
I think the expectations, I don't want to say low, but not to the point where you expect this guy to come in and get you 30, 35 goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
For years, when Koivu's been here, the who wears the C, who's going to wear the C conversation is just taken over. Now it's officially going to come to fruition. Pat, I'll be honest, I think the captain thing is one of the most overrated thing in the history of sports. But that being said, it looks like we're gonna have a new captain. I don't think there's a great answer on this roster. No. So do you just do the Jacques Lemaire rotate thing? Do you give it to Jared Spurgeon? I've heard people say Foligno, which just seems odd to give it to like a 4th line forward. What would you do with the captaincy? Because the fans want to know.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I would probably mix it around a little bit and see who emerges. I mean, when I remember when they drafted Cunning, one of the first things which kind of scared me that came out of the general manager's mouth at the time was, he has the ability to be a captain. Well, okay, I'm not so worried about who's going to be a captain. You have a bunch of leaders on your team, right? You should.
Yeah.
A good team does.
You had Parise and Suter at the time. You should have been thinking leadership.
Right. Yeah. Right. And for me, it's a guy who's going to keep everybody together. and avoid the ups and the downs, and keep things kind of even keel, because playing an 80 game schedule over the length of time that they do, you're going to have ups and downs. And who is that guy or guys that have the ability, to keep everybody together? And sometimes that can be collectively. So I do agree to a certain extent, unless you're that superstar in Sidney Crosby, who is a good leader, and B, brings it every night and produces every night. It's hard to get a great captain. And so, I think they'll probably end up doing it collectively, at least, to start out the season, and kind of see where things go.
Pat, there's so many more topics we could talk about, but
Yep.
we're out of time, so we'll have to save some of those for next week. Appreciate your time.
Sounds great, Brandon. Thank you.
All right, he's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. Thanks to Josh Fenton, who is the commissioner of the NCHC, for joining us. We really appreciate his time. And thanks to Culturama and SodaStick, sodastick.com. Use the code KFAN for free shipping when you make an order at sodastick.com. We will talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Thanks for watching and listening.